and welcome back to Wake Up with Dr. Cheryl for Wealth Transformation. I'm Dr. Cheryl Shire, PhD in Financial Management and Business Administration, and I'm a minister. I'm an author, entrepreneur, and speaker. Our mission is, with purposeful passion and lighthearted joy, we want to educate the audience for changing the unconscious mindset and heartfelt attitude, relationship, and behavior with currency and wealth to heal the core and past programming towards the freedom that you deserve and apply spiritual principles to your wealth. With this being said, I'd like to start with a joke. Sam Silverman walks into his boss's office. "Sir, I'll be straight with you. I know the economy isn't great, but I have over 3 companies very interested in me. They're constantly calling, and I would like to respectfully ask for a raise." After a few minutes haggling, the boss finally agrees to a 5% raise, and Sam happily gets up to leave. "By the way," asked the boss, as Sam is getting up, "which 3 companies keep calling you?" "Oh, if you must know," Sam says, "it's the electric company, the water company, and the phone company." Are you practicing your mindful, unconditional love, being non-judgmental, being non-critical? I'm talking about towards yourself and others. This all starts with you. When you judge another, you do not define them, you define yourself, and that's by Wayne Dyer. This all starts with you. When you get this message on a cellular level, and we mean from the core, that you don't have to think about it, and it is second nature, you will be free. You will be free for your wealth transformation on all levels. Not just money, but all levels. And it takes practice. Practice your mindfulness in every moment with the way you talk and treat yourself. Think about it. Take inventory of your thoughts. Pay attention to every word you say to yourself in a day. Is there self-defeating language in your conversations? Be mindful and be aware of what is being said in your mind. And you cannot afford the negative thoughts that run through your head, your mind. Change your thinking, and you are changing your life. Listening, listening, listening. This seems like it should be easy, but for most it is not. Listening is an art. Listening is honoring yourself and another being. It is letting go of holding on to your thoughts you have in your mind and stopping those thoughts long enough so you can have a blank canvas or a blank window or a frame in your mind to listen to someone else. You cannot listen to anyone if your mind is chattering. Listen to someone. Listening to someone, especially someone you love, is the best gift you can give them. Imagine your mind as a film strip with hundreds, even thousands of frames moving fast. The experts say that we do think over 60,000 words a day. The frames are always moving to make the movie, the film. In our mind's eye, practice slowing it down. Slow it down to just a single frame, a window. When you can stop the frames, you see only one frame or window. This is where you can listen. This is when you can listen. The mind has stopped talking. It is blank. It is receptive. Now you can listen. This is the greatest gift you can give yourself and others. Practice this simple exercise. It works. You will be rewarded more than you will ever know when you practice listening. This is the only way you can learn. I know I sound like this is part 1 of 2 parts, a 2-part discussion with Nicholas Zaldastani. Well, Nicholas is known for his startup success rate. Nicholas Zaldastani focuses on entrepreneurship and organizations that positively impact the world. Nicholas is a mentor capitalist leveraging his venture capital, and serial entrepreneurial experience. Mr. Zaldastani's investments and executive leadership contributed to the growth of corporations such as Oracle, Open Horizon, World Energy Solutions, Salary.com, Allegro, Multimedia, and Crockpond, New Reality, and Nexus. Whew. In addition, Mr. Zaldastani's operational leadership, his 11 years as a venture capitalist brought solid returns to his investors. In the development of the country of Georgia, Mr. Zaldastani has supported Georgia's economic recovery and plans and educational expansion. He was part of the U.S. delegation attending the inauguration of President Saakashvili, and excuse me for mispronouncing, and on the U.S. presidential visit of Mr. and Mrs. George W. Bush, Mr. Zaldastani welcomed former First Lady Laura Bush to the American Academy of Tbilisi, and excuse me for mispronouncing. Mr. Zaldastani received his MBA from Harvard University School of Business, a French diploma from the University of Paris, and a Bachelor of Science degree from Duke University. He was a team member receiving the CLIO International Award for Advertising. Mr. Zaldastani lives in San Francisco, California. Questions that I want to ask you, and I'll start with the first one. How were you taught about the value and the mindset and how to feel about money and wealth when you were growing up, from your caregivers, from your teachers, from your neighbors, whoever? But how were you taught?
You know, that's an interesting question, because we have so many things that influence how we look at money, how we look at all the counterparts of money, how do we look at religion, how we look at education. And we have a great deal of real dependence on our parents. And often it is our parents that make up a lot of who we are, because so much is developed in the early childhood years. I mean, by the time of 6, we've got so much developed already.
Well, they say that by the time you're 5, you're pretty much set.
Well, you know, it's interesting. They do say that, and now there's new studies that are saying that it's even beyond that, that we do go further. But in essence, we have a lot set up pretty early for ourselves.
So T. Barry Brazelton, that's changed? Because
it's changing, I think.
When I had my daughter, that's who I listened to, and he's from Harvard.
Yeah.
And they said from 1 to 5.
Well, I think that's still a dominance.
The basics. But I don't know how that can be, because there's so much to be learned.
Well, there is, but I think it has a lot to do with what they call subconscious or other conscious brain basically gets versus the conscious, and how education.
Now you're talking my language.
How education kind of plays with us a little bit. I mean, but to answer your question, of course, any child would say their parents had a lot to do with who they were made up, and I had basically a father that was a businessman. You know, went to Harvard Business School, was an immigrant to this country, had $50 in his pocket, from the Republic of Georgia. That's below Russia. Okay. He was born in a little town there, lived in Tbilisi, the capital, and then escaped in 1924, went to France until the age of about 30, and then came over here to go to Harvard Business School. So he is a real...
That's quite a jump.
Oh, yeah.
From Georgia to Harvard. How did that come about?
Well, both my uncle and my father, education was a very, very important part of what they were made up. I mean, they believed, and I think correctly so, that the more you know, the better off you are. But to touch on your question, which I think is really important, here I had a very strong educational influence on me, and very much, you know, the economic, you know, supply and demand curve, and, you know, the importance of you know, making money and what that's all about. And then on the other side, my mother's an artist. My mother is a wonderfully...
So that's kind of a dichotomy.
It's quite... Now, I will say, in fairness to my father, he has that side. I mean, I think that's why they were attracted to each other. Yeah. But, you know, the more important thing is having that dichotomy, having those two things happening in my life. And the fact was that at the end of the day, I think it is important to have structure in your life when it comes to the right process of making money. But you have to also have the artistic side, creative side that accepts the fact that things don't always go the way you expect them to go, especially when it comes to money.
I think that's an understatement.
Oh yes, it's quite the adventure we have, don't we?
Especially in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's amazing what has been uncovering and what is still, you know, surfacing in global corporations of the greed and the crimes, etc. And it's like, it's time to wake up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's part of why I have my show, is because, you know, it's not just the big corporations, it's the everyday, you know, worker that goes to PG&E or to the telephone company, anybody, but to look at things a little differently. So what was your value around money, though? I mean, I know that you have a solid, it sounds like the educational piece of it, but how did you actually feel about money?
Well, it's interesting. This starts to now touch beyond the family. You know, I would say that my father and mother shared one thing in common, that was that money wasn't the end all. In other words, it was the byproduct of doing things right. So if you had a good education and really worked hard at something, the money would follow. That type of thinking. And I think that's been my fundamental side of me. But I'll never forget, I had a mentor when I was in my early teens, a man by the name of General Dorio. General Dorio was a professor at Harvard Business School, and he is basically...
What kind of a general was he?
He was a French general.
Oh, okay.
And he was a business school professor. Also...
So he was a French general in the U.S.?
Yeah, that was just... He was a general.
He was
when
former
he was a young
general?
kid.
Oh, okay.
Exactly.
But okay, he held that position.
Yeah, he held that position. Very bright man. And he was a professor at Harvard Business School, and I had the opportunity, because he and my father were friends, to get to know him. And of course,
nice.
he exuded, you know, the capitalism of this world. And he was the one that actually formed Digital Equipment Corp, DEC, one of the first computer companies back in the 50s and 60s. And he was involved with that. And he was also assigned, or basically given the fact that he was one of the first venture capitalists. So very much involved in how do you get the money.
You had some really more sophisticated modeling as growing up.
Oh yeah, and he was the one that I used to go see him, and it was almost like going to have an interview. It was really an intense moment. I got a few opportunities.
Was he a very serious man?
He was a very serious man. Had a very thick French accent, and but just a very you know, he was a friend of my father, so it was very loving.
Yeah. Part of the family.
Yeah, but at the same point, I never really felt like he was a friend. He was much older, and I had, you know, I really looked up to him. And why I bring that up is that he really brought into the importance of recognizing that there is more than just doing the job right, that doing the job right with some structure is very important. And he gave me one of the greatest insights, and that is, if you really want to learn marketing, he said to me, because we were talking about marketing, so if you really, really want to learn marketing, you need to go and work in a grocery store. Because in a grocery store, you have every part of the marketing mix involved. You have perishable products, you have non-perishable. You have couponing, you have everything going on. You have in-store advertising. And you know, anybody that's thinking about, you know, a career in marketing should either work in a grocery store or really just live in a grocery store for a while and learn it. But it was, why was that valuable? Because I was 14 at the time when he told me that. And you know, I really thought about that, and I would go into grocery stores and I'd be thinking about what he had said, and I started putting together the structure. Remember, I was talking about structure and the importance of structure.
I was going to ask you, what define that? What do you mean?
Well, in the sense of, there is a bridge between an idea and a consumer buying a product that came out of that idea. And so,
I mean, the idea won't go anywhere.
It won't go anywhere, exactly.
Unless you have the structure, it just doesn't work.
It doesn't work. And so there are pieces along the way. And that's what he exposed me to. That was a thing, and I got that at a very young age. And I actually, when I was in college, was a structural engineer, studying structural engineering. My uncle was a structural engineer, and he did things like Logan Airport and Copley Place and Faneuil Hall in Boston. So I learned a lot about structures and how they get built. And so if you visualize this bridge, you recognize there's components along the way. And the bottom line is you have to build that type of structure for this thing to happen.
Right.
And so because of that, it brought a new essence, a new thought to my mind, a new way of looking at things. In essence, brought a structure to the way I looked at business and therefore making money.
So I'm still wondering, because I asked you how you feel about, and I know that it's hard to articulate sometimes on how you feel about money, wealth. But I think it's an important piece.
It is.
Because it's covered up, it's masked. So if you can articulate how you felt, and I'm saying, if you can put yourself back in those early days, how you felt about it versus now.
Well, I think, it's interesting because you're right. I mean, I think thoughts and feelings are so often convoluted, and we jump to one or the other depending on the type of person we are.
Right.
But to answer your question, I think my feeling toward money was very much inherited from my parents, which was it was a byproduct. And so even with General Dorio's wonderful structure, and then of course followed on education and other mentors that I had in my life, it really was the feeling never really changed from what I learned originally, and that is it does follow great work. And great work is defined by how I feel. In other words, I might do something and it doesn't result in a monetary reward, but if I felt I did the best I could, or I felt that I really did great work, then that was the best I could do, and I need to let everything else go. It might not translate into the money.
Right.
And I think often a lot of people get so wrapped up in what happens and how well they did on the money side that affects how they
attached
feel.
To the outcome.
Exactly.
You mean?
Exactly.
Yeah. And if you're attached to the outcome in anything that you do, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Totally. More than disappointment, I think. I think we're starting to learn, and this is going way off tangent of where we're talking, but we're starting to learn about the effects that our heart has on our brain, and how these two things are actually a lot more connected than we ever thought. And there's work at HeartMath and other organizations, and I just saw a marvelous film, Tom Shadyac, who produced a lot of very funny movies with Jim Carrey, has come out with a movie called I Am, and I highly recommend one goes and sees it. It's tremendous, and there's a scene in there I cannot forget. There's a scene where there's a jar of yogurt, and yogurt's was originated from Georgia, so it's always been sort of an interesting product in my childhood. But
it originated from there.
Yeah, that's
so
what
the Greeks
can't.
can't.
No, don't tell them that.
Okay.
Maybe don't tell the Georgians. But they have this jar, this yogurt in a jar, and then they have two electrodes going into the yogurt, and it goes into a meter. And during the filming, they actually ask Tom questions, and the meter responds.
In the yogurt, from the
yogurt, and just of how he's feeling.
Is this guy touching the yogurt?
He's not touching it at all.
Is this for real?
It's for real. You got to see this film.
So the energy, energy from him
exactly.
is, well, I
and
totally,
it's heart energy.
Yeah.
Because the questions he was asked were about that. So
but
why
it
do I bring
starts
that?
in the mind.
The mind can tell the word.
Well, it starts in the mind.
We'll see.
Everything starts in the mind.
Let's.
Everything starts in the mind, but you allow yourself to feel it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. So the
yogurt.
So
where I'm going with that whole story
was a meter.
It is a meter, but it's a response to how we're feeling. So where I'm going here is the way we feel about something. That was a question you were asking. I think has a lot to do with how we resonate. So if we have a feeling that is not comfortable, then it's not going to respond. If we have a feeling that is comfortable, it's going to respond positively.
Right.
And my feeling about money has always been abundance. It's always been, will have as much as I need, even if I just have $6 in my pocket.
Right.
And that to me is really the...
Well, see, that's abundant thinking right there, because when you know, and I say this multiple times and I can't say it enough, is that when you know you have more than enough for your needs, and if you know that in your mind, in your heart, then what's the problem?
Yeah.
There's no problem.
That's right.
Especially when there's more than enough to have $8 to $10 million a piece. It's mind-boggling. Yeah. Anyway, so I think that's good. I'm really curious about that yogurt test, though. That's interesting. I mean, I believe that. Louise Hay, you know, there's a cause for everything in our bodies. So that mind, that metaphysical connection is, you know, we're getting educated more about it and practicing it, because it takes practice to learn that, to understand that.
I agree completely.
So what do spiritual principles mean to you?
You know, that's a good question. I was brought up Christian. My father...
Orthodox?
Orthodox Christian, yep. You have Georgian Orthodox, you have Russian Orthodox, Greek Orthodox. And so I was baptized there. You know, and my mother grew up in a Christian. She actually taught Sunday school. So I grew up in a very Christian household. And I think that, you know, spiritually it is, to me, it's what's important is if we put all of us into a room right now, if I brought someone from every religion and every race and brought them into this room right now, it's amazing how we'd get along.
I know.
You know, and so, you know, I think we allow for some barriers to get set up that I really wish we wanted. You know, one of the things that comes out of, you know, of a lot of things I've seen is you get the greatest thought leaders together, and I truly believe they, you know, across all cultural divides, they would in fact make a huge difference. And you know, it's so important for us to recognize that, and that to me takes very strong spiritual beliefs, because it takes one to recognize that I might have a particular spiritual belief, but I am accepting of others that have different ones. But at the end of the day, we're humans.
And we're all, to me, we're all under one divine intelligence, divine power, God, whatever you want to call it. I'm sure there's people that would argue with me about that, but when it comes down to it, we're all one. We're all made of the same cellular being, and I believe spiritual. But so how do you apply the spirituality with wealth? That's the key.
Well,
here.
You know, if I come back to what I've shared already, one, it's a comfort. I think that one of the things that I was taught is, does something feel spiritually smooth or not?
What does that mean?
In other words, if I do something today and I go to bed, am I feeling I did it in the right way? Is it smooth? If I'm rubbing my fingers and I'm feeling about the day a roughness, that means I probably did something I shouldn't have done. And that's something I probably don't want to repeat that.
I mean, does that?
It happens to all of us.
Yeah. Oh well,
you know?
we all.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, there's.
That's how we learn.
Yeah,
I mean, I would hope it happens in some ways, because that means we're stretching ourselves a bit. But I think it's how we deal with that that's so important. But coming back to that spiritual feeling, it is having that comfort. And then if we don't have that comfort, the ability to address it right away. I so applaud people that are able to sit someone down and say, Nicholas, you know, I really like you for who you are, but you did something yesterday that kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And this is what happened. This is my view of it. How do you feel about it? And I would have said 10 years ago, that's so touchy-feely, but it is so important.
That is so important, because communication is the key. It's key. And one thing before we move on is, there's a metaphor that I want to share with you about what you're saying about the rubbing. Is that, you know, the oyster, it's smooth, the oyster itself, but the sand gets in the shell. And the sand irritates the oyster. It irritates it and irritates it and irritates it. And what does it make? It makes a pearl. Right. So, you know, I know that Michael Beckwith says the rub. And to me, you know I have had so many challenges in my life, but and I've chosen I haven't consciously chosen the challenges, but I have consciously chosen to learn from them, and all of them. I mean, I'm still learning. I'll learn till I die. But it's like, you know, I think of that metaphor of the pearl, and I think we're all pearls. We're all pearls. It's just getting, you know, that rub, and it's that friction that refines us, you know, the diamond in the rough, or whatever you want to say. Anyway, I just wanted to share that metaphor. So do you think that you apply what you're saying in every avenue of your life when it comes to money.
I sure try.
Yeah, well, that's, you know, I mean, that's all we can do.
It is, you know, especially when you're dealing and going through the most challenging parts of your life, it makes you recognize how difficult it is. And it's so easy to talk about like we are here, and it's so hard to do. And this is where I think masterminds and friends are so important
totally.
Because, you know, it's really interesting. I have friends now that, you know, are going through challenges. I'm going through challenges, you're going through but it's when we talk about it, there's one day that I'll be the one that's the supporter and there and don't worry about it and I'm there for you, and there's the next day that they are doing that to me.
Yeah.
And you know, that's a great friendship, and that's where, you know, you've really opened up and you're allowing people to be supportive at that time when it is challenging. Yeah. And I think, you know, there's two sides of it. One is the being cognizant of it. You know, in other words, that I did have some stuff today that was not so smooth, and rejoicing in it actually, because to the point of it's going to make that pearl, you know. Yes. and that's and not getting all upset. And again, that's so easy to say and hard to do, but when you're able to talk to someone about it, you start to recognize, yes, in fact, that happened. The other one is the commitment to yourself, because at the end of the day, that's so important to tell yourself tomorrow you're going to try to do it better.
Yeah, well,
and that
you know,
to me is
there's
so
this
critical.
saying about, I actually don't even like to use the word try, because you're either doing it or you're not doing it. And I know
like I'm talking to myself.
that sounds kind of trite,
yeah.
You know, and I don't mean it that way. It's just, but you're either doing it or you're not doing it. So if you're not growing, you're dying. I had